New York Times best-selling author, emergency room doctor Daniel Kalla, knows a thing or two about the current healthcare crisis in America. In his new fictional book of Flesh and Blood, he takes readers through the twists and turns of a medical drama relating to superbugs and pandemics. Dr. Dan Kalla, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
It's great to be here, dear.
Now, you are an emergency room doctor, obviously dealing with some of these issues when people come in with flu and other ailments. Did you weave some of those stories in? I imagine protecting the names.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you have to be careful, and when you try to be too realistic and too true to life, it kind of backfires. But sure, the flavor of what I see has had a huge impact on me. Particularly, like you say, with pandemics. I had H1N1 in the fall, so I know what it's like to suffer from a virus.
Right, you mentioned that. You had H1N1, your daughter had it.
Yep.
Clearly, it has been one of the huge fears of people in this country and really all over the world. When you talk about it in this book, in a fictional way like this, do you feel like you're able to educate people because they can follow this story, or are you scaring them?
A little of both. I want to scare them and entertain them at the same time, but I do want to open some eyes and make people aware of what's out there. And you know, in H1N1, in a way, because it turned out to be so mild in retrospect compared to what it could have been, I think people might get a little complacent, and that worries me because I talk a lot in this book about the Spanish flu, which was the mother of all illnesses, you know, which is the worst medical catastrophe, worst human catastrophe to ever happen, and people don't quite realize that. 100 million dead, you know, within 8 months, and that is the kind of fear, at least awareness, I like to raise.
Well, that's what I think is interesting in this book. You take this sort of historical look back, and then you educate us and weave it into the future, hoping, I assume, to teach us something so we can kind of learn from the mistakes of the past.
Sure. And especially because I have the opportunity, we talk about superbugs in this novel. There's a superbug ravaging this sort of fictional Mayo Clinic-like hospital, right. But it goes back in history and compares that to how the hospital dealt with the Spanish flu and the contrasts and comparisons. You know, sure, we're more advanced, we have better public health control, but it doesn't mean it's any easier to contain and control these pathogens.
The story is so relatable, though, because you're not only talking about sort of a superbug infecting a hospital, but you've got it woven into this heart transplant and a family situation where you've got a father and a daughter who are both working at the same medical facility. Do you think that it works better to be able to tell it with that kind of story that maybe sucks people into reading it, yeah, as opposed to just giving the facts?
Absolutely. That's how, I mean, one of the things that got me into fiction writing is that's how I love to get my information. You know, a good historical novel where you care about the characters and incidentally learn about the history. And that's what I was trying to do here. Take people behind the scenes of a hospital and give them a feel of what a heart transplant is like and what an outbreak is like, but also make them care and worry about the characters and what's going to happen to this hospital.
Well, one of the things I must say, as a doctor, you would think you know science, but the writing is incredibly colorful. Did you have sort of a dual major when you thought about this in terms of no. crafting your writing?
No, I mean, you know, in sort of my writing experience and background, in grade 10, I wrote a postcard that went over pretty well, and then I didn't write again for about 15 years, but I was convinced in my heart that I could do this, and that once I took it up, I compare it to my little own crack habit. I just couldn't stop once I was addicted to writing.
One thing I want to ask you as a journalist, I have to say now, if I'm reading this and I'm saying it's fiction, I fear that perhaps people who will read it will take things as fact. When it comes to all of the medical issues inside the book, are they true to form? Yeah,
I hope so. I spend a lot of time researching. I feel a responsibility to get the medical facts right, being a doctor, and so I take good care. And it's not, I don't just rely on my own knowledge and experience. I turn to my colleagues and books and online, and I hope it's as accurate and up-to-date as I could possibly make it.
So you're doing a tremendous amount of research in terms of writing the book and making the medical information accurate, and then just weaving in sort of a colorful story about characters.
Yeah.
Did you use your own family and life for any of this, or people that you knew?
Well, you know, this whole story is about this medical dynasty, you know, this medical pioneer who started this hospital 100 years ago against the odds and great personal sacrifice and built this hospital up to what it is today, and his family is still involved. It's this medical dynasty that still runs this hospital, and that's kind of my own story. We didn't build a hospital, but I'm like a fourth-generation doctor, and you can't go to a family reunion without, you swing a dead cat without hitting a surgeon, a family doctor. You know, medicine is in my family. It's in the business, and that's what I tried to convey a little of what that is like to grow grow up in a medical family.
So there's even some truth in the characters here. Well, it is so beautifully written, and I think very informational about some of the issues that really are concerning us now when you have the infectious diseases and the flus and the superbugs, which really are pretty scary at this point. Thank you so much for coming in, Dr. Dan Kalla. Pleasure to meet you. The new book is Of Flesh and Blood, and it is on store shelves now. Next in the